My three adult children missed my open-heart surgery, but all three arrived early for Thanksgiving after hearing I might sell the house. Nolan brought a tape measure and called it a joke. Sabrina photographed my dining room before she hugged me. Paige asked whether I still remembered the password to my banking app. 5 weeks earlier, not one of them had sat in the chair beside my hospital bed. They had posted smiling pictures from a luxury lodge, while a nurse helped me take my first steps after surgery. Now they filled my kitchen with flowers, expensive wine, and concern that sounded rehearsed. They believed age had made me soft, frightened, and grateful for whatever crumbs of attention they offered. I let them carve the turkey, praise the importance of family, and upload one more lie to social media. Then, just before dessert, I told them I was not dying. I was simply done financing people who treated me as if I already had. My name is Everett Cole. I was 74 that November, a retired maintenance supervisor for the Des Moines Public Library System. For 39 years, I fixed everything from burst pipes to elevators that stopped between floors. My wife, Ruth, used to say, I could hear a failing motor through 2 concrete walls, but could not hear when someone was taking advantage of me across the dinner table. Ruth had been gone 6 years by then, and I had spent most of those years proving her right. We raised our children in a red brick house in Beaverdale, the kind with oak floors, a narrow driveway, and a maple tree that dropped enough leaves every October to bury a small car. It was also, in my children's minds, their future payout. Nolan, my oldest, was 48 and owned a small kitchen remodeling company in West Des Moines. He introduced himself as self-made, which was technically true if you ignored the $62,000 I gave him when his first business failed, the truck I let him use for 3 years, and the back half of my garage where he stored cabinets without paying rent. Sabrina was 44, an assistant principal in Ankeny, married to a pharmaceutical sales representative named Derek. They lived in a house with 5 bedrooms, a backyard pool, and a monthly payment that made both of them anxious. I had paid their son Mason's private school tuition for 4 years because Sabrina said the public middle school would limit his potential. Paige, my youngest, was 33 and worked irregular hours managing social media for local restaurants. She was funny, impulsive, and permanently one emergency away from needing $1,400. Her rent, car repair, dental bill, security deposit, dog surgery, and temporary credit card problem had all passed through my checking account. None of my children called these things dependence. They called them family helping family. I called them 6 weeks before my surgery. A cardiologist had discovered that my aortic valve had narrowed dangerously. I had blamed the shortness of breath on age until I nearly fainted carrying laundry upstairs. Dr. Patel explained the procedure in a calm voice and drew a simple picture of my heart on a yellow pad. He said the operation was common, but common did not mean small. My chest would be opened. A machine would do the work of my heart for a while. I would spend at least a week in the hospital and several more weeks unable to drive, lift, or sleep comfortably. You'll need someone at home, he said. Not someone who checks by text, someone physically there. I nodded as though I had a waiting list of volunteers. Nolan answered on the 3rd ring. A power saw whined behind him. I told him the date October cow and asked whether he could come the evening before. Absolutely, he said. You're not doing this alone. Then, before we hung up, he asked whether I had ever considered having the house appraised. He said one of his clients had sold nearby for an unbelievable price. Just good information to have, Dad. Sabrina gasped when I told her, and immediately said she would organize everyone. She created a family group chat called Dad's Hurt Team with a red heart emoji. For 2 days, she sent links about low-sodium meals, recovery pillows, and the best slip-on shoes after surgery. When I asked who could stay the first week, the chat went quiet for 9 hours. Then Sabrina wrote, "We'll divide it up. Don't stress." Paige called me crying. She said the thought of losing me made her realize how much she loved me. 20 minutes later, she asked whether I could cover the remaining balance on her rent because she had been too upset to work. I transferred $1,200. She sent 3 heart emojis and wrote, "See you before surgery, Dad." 3 days before the operation, Nolan called. A contractor had walked off a job in Cedar Rapids, and Nolan needed to rescue the project. He said he would drive me to the hospital, leave after I checked in, and return before I woke. "This job keeps 8 people paid," he reminded me. "You understand responsibility." I did understand it. I had built most of my life around it. I told him to handle the job. 2 days before surgery, Sabrina announced that Mason had been invited to a selective soccer showcase in Kansas City the same weekend. Coaches from serious programs would be watching. She said Derek could take him, but Mason performed better when she was there. I hate this timing, she said, but you'll be asleep most of that day anyway. Paige waited until the night before. She left a voice message saying she had caught a stomach bug and did not want to risk infecting me. In the background, I heard music, and someone asked whether she wanted another margarita. She ended with, "You know I'd be there if I could." House sip the next morning. I stood alone in my kitchen wearing loose sweatpants and the flannel shirt Ruth had given me on our last Christmas together. I was not allowed coffee, so I filled the kettle out of habit and then emptied it. The house felt as if it were holding its breath. On the counter sat the recovery calendar with my children's names written across it. I turned it face down. Yesip. My neighbor Denise Marino knocked. Denise was 69, a retired elementary school librarian who lived across the alley. I had mentioned the surgery while helping her replace a porch light. When she learned Nolan had canceled, she did not offer sympathy. She put my overnight bag in her Subaru and said, "Lock the door, Everett. We're going to be late." At the hospital, every question seemed designed to expose me. Who was my emergency contact? Who would speak for me if I could not speak? Who would take me home? Who would stay the first night? I gave Nolan's name because he was my oldest, then gave Denise's number because she was the person standing there. A nurse named Camille fastened an identification band around my wrist and asked whether I wanted my daughter brought back before they took me downstairs. "She's not here," I said. Camille glanced toward Denise. I explained that Denise was my neighbor. The pity in Camille's eyes was gentle, which somehow made it worse. Denise took my hand and said, "Today I'm whoever he needs." I remember the bright operating room and Dr. Patel asking me to think of somewhere peaceful. I thought of Ruth at our dining table on Thanksgiving morning, flour on her cheek, scolding Nolan for stealing pieces of sausage from the stuffing. Then everything disappeared. When I woke, a machine breathed loudly beside me, and pain sat on my chest like a concrete block. Denise was there. Not one of my children was. She had waited almost 9 hours, spoken to the surgeon, and sent updates to the family chat. Nolan reacted to one update with a thumbs up. Sabrina wrote, "Great news." Paige did not respond until midnight, when she asked if I could remember where I kept the spare key because she might stop by the house at some point. The first 2 days blurred into alarms, medicine, nausea, and nurses asking me to cough into a pillow when every cough felt like punishment. Nolan called once from his truck. He spoke for 6 minutes, 4 of which were about the Cedar Rapids project. Before hanging up, he asked whether the deed to the Beaverdale house was stored in my desk or the safe deposit box. "I'm asking because medical emergencies make identity theft more likely," he said. I told him my papers were secure. Sabrina sent cheerful updates about Mason's tournament to the same chat created for my surgery. His team reached the semifinals. There were photographs of hotel waffles, matching jerseys, and Sabrina smiling between Derek and Mason beneath a banner that read, "Chase the moment." She called me on the third evening, apologized for the noise in the restaurant, and promised she would come Monday. Paige sent a selfie from her couch under a blanket, holding tea. The television behind her reflected 2 people dancing, and the timestamp was from the night she claimed to be sick. Her caption said, "Still recovering. Love you so much." The chair beside my bed was upholstered in brown vinyl. It had a crease down the center and a wooden arm scratched white near the front. I studied it while other families came and went. A woman in the next room had 6 grandchildren, taking turns bringing soup. An older man at the end of the hall complained that his sons were arguing over who got to stay overnight. I envied his argument. Denise visited every afternoon. She brought my glasses, clean socks, and a mystery novel I never managed to read. She watered my plants and collected my mail without being asked. On day 5, she sat in the brown chair and told me about a second grader who had once returned the same library book 17 times because he liked hearing her say his name. "People go where they feel expected," she said. I looked at her and asked, "What if the people you expected never come?" Denise did not give me a comforting lie. "Then you stop reserving the chair." On day 6, physical therapy helped me walk the length of the hall. I had taken 12 slow steps when my phone buzzed in my robe pocket. Paige had posted a photograph on Instagram. All three of my children were standing beneath strings of lights at a lodge near Lake of the Ozarks. Nolan held a bourbon glass. Sabrina wore a cream sweater and leaned against Derek. Paige had one arm around Mason. The caption read, "Family Weekend. Life is short, make time for the people who matter." I enlarged the photograph because I could not believe all three of them were in the same place. A wooden sign behind them displayed the name of the lodge. I checked the family chat. Nolan had said he was still in Cedar Rapids. Sabrina had said she was home preparing for Monday's district meeting. Paige was supposedly too weak to drive 15 minutes to the hospital, yet they had driven 3.5 hours south together. I called Nolan. He answered on the fifth ring and walked somewhere quieter. At first he tried surprise, then he tried explanation. Derek's parents had booked the lodge months earlier for an early Thanksgiving gathering. The reservation was non-refundable. The children needed one normal weekend after all the stress around Dad. When I asked why they had lied, he said they were protecting my feelings. "You were stable," he told me. "Denise was there. What did you want us to do, sit in a chair and watch you sleep?" I looked at the empty brown chair. "Yes," I said. "That is exactly what I wanted." Nolan sighed. "Dad, please don't turn this into a loyalty test." Behind him, I heard Paige laugh. Then Sabrina called out, "Is he okay?" Not to me, but to Nolan, like I was weather being checked before an outdoor meal. I ended the call. I spent 8 nights in the hospital. Denise was there when I was discharged. The nurse insisted someone stay with me for 48 hours, so Denise packed a small bag and slept in my guest room. She set alarms for my medicine, made scrambled eggs, and pretended not to notice when I needed both hands to lower myself onto the toilet. Vulnerability is not simply needing help. It is discovering who does not mind that you need it. On the second morning, Denise found me staring at the recovery calendar. Nolan's name crossed the first 4 days. Sabrina's filled the next 3. Paige's covered the weekend. Not one square had happened. "Do you want me to throw that away?" she asked. I said no. I folded it and placed it in the drawer beneath Ruth's old recipe box. I needed to remember the difference between a promise and a person. My children did not come during those first 48 hours. Nolan sent a food delivery gift card for $50. Sabrina arranged for a grocery store to deliver 6 cans of soup, 4 of them too salty for my diet. Paige asked if I still planned to transfer her rent on the 1st, because late fees would really set her back. I read her message while Denise changed the dressing over the incision in my chest. I did not answer. 10 minutes later, Paige sent, "I know you're recovering, but ignoring me is scary." 20 minutes after that, "If something happens to my apartment, I hope you understand this affects whether I can help you later." There it was. She had turned Future Care into a subscription service, and my payment was due. I did not call my children to announce a punishment or threaten anyone with an inheritance. I opened my bank statements. For years, I had avoided adding the numbers because love looked uglier when organized into columns. That afternoon, I organized it. Nolan's business loan, 2 truck repairs, materials for a job he underbid, and the property taxes he could not cover. One spring totaled $91,000. Sabrina's pool repair, Mason's tuition, family vacations framed as educational opportunities, and a kitchen renovation she promised would be the last request totaled $87,000. Paige's transfers over 6 years totaled $64,000. That did not include birthdays, weddings, groceries, or the countless small rescues I no longer remembered. I had spent nearly $250,000 making sure my adult children never had to feel the full weight of their choices. They had spent one weekend making sure I felt the full weight of mine. I canceled Paige's automatic transfer. I emailed the school to say I would finish Mason's current semester, but not renew the tuition arrangement. I told Nolan he had 60 days to remove his cabinets and equipment from my garage because I needed the space. Then I called a real estate agent named Helen Cho and asked what my house might sell for in spring. I did not do any of it to make them suffer. I did it because my sternum was wired together. My body was relearning ordinary movement, and I finally understood I did not have unlimited time to keep buying temporary closeness. Thanksgiving was 5 weeks after surgery. Ruth had always hosted, and after she died, I continued because traditions can become a way of keeping someone's chair at the table. I considered canceling. Then I decided the meal would be useful, not as a trap, but as an ending spoken face-to-face. I invited all 3 children, their spouses, and Mason. I also invited Denise, but she declined. This conversation belongs to you, she said. Call me when the house is quiet. My children arrived carrying evidence of devotion. Nolan brought an expensive bottle of Cabernet and a cordless heating pad for circulation. He hugged me carefully, then asked whether he could look at the upstairs bathroom because a client might want a similar layout. I found him measuring the hallway 10 minutes later. He grinned and said, "Occupational habit." Sabrina brought two centerpieces large enough to block conversation across the table. She took photographs of the porch, the kitchen, Ruth's china, and the maple tree. People love cozy family content, she explained. Paige arrived 40 minutes late in a new wool coat. She kissed my cheek, asked how my scar looked, and then whispered, "Did the rent transfer glitch?" I got a notice. I told her we would talk after dinner. Her face tightened, but she smiled when Sabrina raised the phone. The meal began with politeness so thick it felt like another tablecloth. Nolan carved the turkey and told a story about my teaching him to use a socket wrench. Sabrina praised the strength I had shown through surgery. Paige said the experience had reminded everyone not to take family for granted. Mason, who was 14 and innocent of most of the theater around him, asked why no one had visited me at the hospital. The table went silent. Sabrina said, "Sweetheart, Grandpa needed rest." Mason looked at me. "But you went to the lake." Derek dropped his fork. Nolan reached for the wine. Sabrina told Mason they would discuss manners later. "No," I said. He asked a fair question. Sabrina's smile became rigid. "Dad, Thanksgiving is not the time." The hospital wasn't the time either. Apparently there is never a time that doesn't inconvenience you. Nolan told me everyone had apologized. No one had. Paige said I was being dramatic because the surgery went well. I asked whether they would say that if it had not. She looked down at her plate. Sabrina changed the subject and insisted on taking a family photograph before dessert. She arranged Nolan and me near the fireplace, placed herself beside Mason, and told Paige to stand where the light was softer. Then she handed the phone to me. "Dad, take one first so I can check the framing." I stared at her. "A photograph of my family in my house, without me?" She laughed. "Just one, Dad. Don't make it weird." I took the picture. They smiled beneath the mantel, where Ruth's portrait stood just outside the frame. Then Sabrina reviewed it and said the lighting was perfect. She never asked anyone to take another with me included. While I carried plates to the kitchen, Paige posted the photograph with the caption, "Nothing matters more than showing up for the people who raised you." She tagged my location. I returned to the dining room holding 3 plain envelopes. I placed one before each child. Nolan leaned back. Sabrina stopped smiling. Paige asked whether this was about Christmas money. "Open them," I said. Inside Nolan's envelope was a copy of the message telling him to clear my garage. Sabrina's contained the date Mason's final tuition payment would be made. Paige's held confirmation that the automatic rent transfer had ended. No legal documents, no threats, just 3 simple boundaries. At first, they thought I was trying to frighten them. Nolan said 60 days was impossible because warehouse space was expensive. Sabrina said changing schools would humiliate Mason and damage his future. Paige's face went pale. "You know I can't cover that apartment alone." I told her she could find a roommate, negotiate a new lease, work more hours, or choose a cheaper place. She stared at me as if I had suggested she sleep under a bridge. Then Nolan asked the real question. "Are you selling the house?" I said I was considering a smaller home with no stairs and using my money for my own care. He slapped his palm against the table. "That house is the one thing Mom wanted kept in the family." I looked at Ruth's photograph. "Your mother wanted people kept in the family. You managed to leave your father out while keeping your eye on the bricks." Sabrina began crying, but her tears came with an argument already attached. She said I was punishing Mason for an adult disagreement. I reminded her that she and Derek earned more than I ever had. "Then why did you offer?" she demanded. "Because you said he needed me." "He did. No. You needed my money. Mason needed adults willing to live within their means." Paige stood so quickly her chair struck the wall. "If you do this, don't expect us to drop everything when you can't live alone." The room became still. Even Mason looked frightened. I heard the threat beneath her words and, strangely, felt calmer. "I already needed you," I said. "You went to a lodge." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Nolan accused me of keeping score. Sabrina said parents should help without demanding repayment. I told them I had never demanded repayment. I had asked for presents. Once, during the most frightening week of my life. You didn't owe me because I paid your bills, I said. You owed me nothing. But your choices showed me that my money was welcome where I was not. Nolan said I had always been emotionally distant. Sabrina agreed that after Ruth died, I had become hard to read. Paige claimed she avoided the hospital because seeing me weak would have been traumatic. Each explanation placed the burden back in my lap. I had not been warm enough, clear enough, easy enough to love. You knew how to find me when the tuition was due, I said. You knew how to call when the rent was short. You knew my address when you needed free storage. Do not tell me I was difficult to reach. Sabrina snatched her phone from the table and deleted the photograph, but it was too late. I had seen the caption. I asked all of them to leave. Nolan said I was ruining Thanksgiving. No, I replied. I am ending a performance. He took the wine with him. Sabrina wrapped half the turkey in foil without asking. Because even furious, she considered leftovers part of her entitlement. Paige stood in the doorway with tears running down her face. For 1 second, she looked like the little girl who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms. I almost told her the rent would continue for 3 more months. Then she said, "When you die alone, remember you chose this." I opened the door wider. I was alone in the hospital, I said. That was your choice. What happens next is mine. After their cars disappeared, I called Denise. She arrived with 2 slices of pecan pie and found me sitting at the dining table among dirty plates. I told her everything. When I repeated Paige's final sentence, my voice broke. Denise did not tell me. My daughter had not meant it. She meant it enough to say it, she replied. We ate pie in the kitchen because the dining room felt poisoned. At midnight, Sabrina's social media post appeared. It was a black square with white lettering. Protect your peace, even when an aging parent uses money to control the family. Dozens of people commented with hearts. 2 cousins called me before breakfast. One said I should think about what Ruth would want. The other said older people often become suspicious after anesthesia. By Sunday, the family story was that I had suffered a personality change, lured my children to dinner, and used their financial struggles to humiliate them. I could have posted bank records. I could have uploaded the lodge photograph beside a picture of the empty hospital chair. I drafted a response 3 times. Then I deleted it. Public approval had already cost my family too much. I sent one message to the group chat. My financial support has ended. Do not contact me for money, storage, access to the house, or arguments through relatives. If there is a genuine emergency, email me. I am taking space indefinitely. Then I left the chat and blocked all 3 numbers. December was quiet. I attended cardiac rehabilitation 3 mornings a week, where a former postal worker named Leon complained about the music and secretly encouraged everyone. I learned to walk on a treadmill without gripping the rails. I cooked smaller meals. I replaced Ruth's faded curtains with dark blue ones I had liked for years, but thought the children would call depressing. I hired a young man to clear Nolan's equipment from the garage after the deadline passed. Nolan arrived halfway through, furious, and accused me of sabotaging his company. I stayed on the porch while he shouted. I built that business because you believed in me, he said. I did believe in you, I answered. I still believe you can run it without occupying my life. He said I had changed. I hope so. When he realized I would not argue, he loaded the last cabinets and left. In February, I accepted Helen's offer on the house. I bought a 2-bedroom ranch in a quiet neighborhood near Gray's Lake, 10 minutes from Denise and close to the hospital. The new place had wide doorways, a small workshop, and no staircase waiting to become a problem. I kept what mattered: Ruth's recipe box, our walnut dining table, family photographs from years when smiles had not yet become strategy, and the maple seedling Mason had planted in 2nd grade. I sold or donated the rest. The money from the house stayed in my account. Some went toward future care, some toward travel, and some toward a hospital program that provided rides and temporary home support for older patients discharged alone. I did not attach my children's names to the donation. Their absence had taught me the need. It did not deserve the credit. In July, Mason emailed me from his school account. He wrote that he had transferred to the public high school and liked the robotics club. He said his mother did not know he was contacting me. Then he asked whether I stopped loving him when I stopped paying tuition. I read that question several times before answering. I told him money had never been the measure of my love, that the decisions between adults were not his fault, and that I would always respond if he contacted me freely. I did not criticize Sabrina. I did not recruit him into my side. I ended with, "You never have to perform gratitude to deserve a grandfather." He replied with a photograph of a small wooden bridge his robotics team had built for a load test. I printed it and placed it in my workshop. The anniversary of my surgery arrived on a rainy Wednesday. During a routine appointment, a receptionist handed me an emergency contact form. Nolan's name was still printed on it. I stared at that line longer than necessary. Then I crossed it out and wrote Denise Moreno. That small act hurt more than selling the house. It also felt more truthful. Family, I had learned, was not automatically the person most entitled to your weakness. Family was the person who could be trusted not to monetize it. The following Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner at the new house. Denise came with sweet potatoes. Leon brought rolls he claimed to have baked, although the grocery store label was still attached. 2 people from the discharge program joined us, along with Mason, after Sabrina reluctantly agreed to let him come for 3 hours. We used Ruth's china and folding chairs. The turkey was dry. The gravy developed lumps. Nobody photographed the rooms before hugging me. Nobody asked what the house was worth. Before dinner, Mason set his phone on a shelf and used the timer so every person could be in the photograph. When the camera flashed, I was seated in the center. Not because I had paid for dinner, but because someone had saved me a place. After dessert, Mason helped me wash dishes. He asked whether I would ever speak to his mother again. I told him I did not know, though by then I did. Reconciliation without accountability would only restart the same arrangement. Sabrina wanted access to my money, and forgiveness that required no honest description of what she had done. Nolan wanted the house more than he wanted to understand the empty chair. Paige wanted rescue and called it love. I did not hate them. Hatred would have kept my life organized around their choices. I simply stopped offering myself as the solution to every problem they refused to solve. People ask whether cutting them off made me feel free. The honest answer is that freedom arrived carrying grief. There are mornings when I want to call Nolan and tell him about a tool sale. There are evenings when I imagine Sabrina walking through my door and saying, without explanation or request, "Dad, we abandoned you, and it was wrong." There are storms when I wonder whether Paige is frightened in her apartment and still wants her father. Then I remember the recovery calendar face down on my counter, the family photograph from the lodge, and the brown vinyl chair that no one filled. I remember Paige saying my help in old age depended on continuing her rent. I remember Sabrina handing me the phone so I could photograph a family that had already edited me out. Missing them does not mean returning as wise. I am no longer waiting in an empty room for people who only arrive when they smell an inheritance. I am no longer paying for the privilege of being excluded from photographs. I am no longer confusing being useful with being loved. My children may someday offer an apology that tells the whole truth and asks for nothing. If that day comes, I can hear it without reopening every door. Forgiveness may be possible. Access is not automatic. Love can remain in a closed room without requiring me to live there. My heart was stopped during surgery so a machine could keep me alive while doctors repaired what had narrowed over time. When it started again, it did not return to its old rhythm immediately. It had to be watched, supported, and taught stability. I think my life did the same. The operation repaired a valve, but the empty chair revealed the deeper blockage. I had spent years sending love outward and accepting almost none in return. Setting a boundary did not make me cruel. It restored circulation to a life that had been feeding everyone, except me. So tell me honestly, was I right to cut off my 3 children after they chose a luxury family weekend over my heart surgery? Or should a parent keep giving them another chance no matter how clearly they have shown what matters most? Shown what matters most? Shown what matters most? Shown what matters most?